Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Make It Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have the lovely, the vibrant, the energetic. I can't think of any other amazing adjectives just right yet, but I'll come up with some more. Dawn Taylor on the podcast today. Thank you, my dear, for joining us on the show.
You are so welcome. I am very excited to be here.
You've already just elevated my day, as I was saying before we even pushed record on this one. And I don't know if you have listened to any of these episodes, but I always start my podcasts with why I appreciate my guests. And the reason why I do this in a more esoteric sense is I believe we need to start telling each other why we love each other. Far be it for me to say it's a great way to start the whole little path to
100%
world
agree.
peace. Yeah, let's go. And to that effect, I appreciate you because you are unapologetically yourself. In a world where people just put on this bullshit facade, you are a real human being. I don't have to guess where you're at. You're just real. We had a couple conversations so far, and you're just awesome. Of course, we're connected to some people that I respect as well, so it also elevates that. But in general, there's something so powerful about somebody who just is good on them, because then if we're not that, how do we build a meaningful relationship? And I feel like that, to me, more than anything, is this a real gift of being given truth and honesty and that's just on top of the fact that I know you're an integrous human being and you have a pretty powerful story from we shared a little bit last time we spoke, which I'm sure we'll get into today. But I just think you're awesome simply because you are you and you don't hold back. So thank you for being that.
You're welcome. It's my husband always says it's my double-edged sword. He's
And there does come two sides to that.
You are so authentically you. He's like, and because of it, people love you or hate you because they don't know how to deal with it. And I said, and it's been interesting as I get older, the less I give a shit about that. If that makes sense. I'm like, no, this is actually who I am. And I'm okay with that. It's really exhausting, by the way, to be fake.
Isn't it?
It takes a lot of energy to try to chameleon all the time and be fake and try to figure out who you have to be for people and who you have to be in a room and trying to constantly recreate who you are based on nothing that you are. That's so exhausting. Yet we do it.
What's the quote? If you never lie, you never have to remember anything, or something like that. Or maybe if you always say the truth, you never have to remember anything. Is that how the thing goes? Because that's what that made me think of right there.
Yeah. Well, I have one on my wall and it says "Be you." Everyone else is already taken.
Classic. Love that.
Right? It's so simple, but we do it in every area of our lives, from our businesses to what our houses look like to how we dress. If you ever walked through a mall and seen a group of friends and they all look like they went to the same store and bought all the same stuff and went to the same hairdresser and got all the same highlights, and you're like, wow, how did you guys all become clones? But yeah, we do.
My favorite version of that is the fall time, and then there's all the girls that put on the same fall outfit. It's always the changing of the season moment where you'll just see it's all the same, and it's always the Han Solo got the vest and the boots and the jeans. And I saw that one last. I and then on top of that was the Starbucks pumpkin latte frappuccino.
Oh no! Don't you have your Stanley? You don't have your Stanley cup that matches your outfit?
I'm gonna talk some smack about my wife right now. She's got one of those Stanley cups, and I give her hell about it all the time.
My husband and I laugh at them constantly. We're like, "What the hell?" Yeah. I could be a little sassy about this.
We gotta have a little sassiness because, and you know what? On top of that, if we can't poke fun at ourselves, what are we doing here? If you can't laugh at yourself, people gotta just chill out. I find anybody who can't do that, they tend to be the most insecure people on the planet, and they used to try to just control everything just like a robot. What are you doing? Just laugh. That's okay. Right? You're gonna be all right.
I had a really funny moment on Friday. So I randomly cut my hair. I am the only human I know that has not had a hairdresser in 20 years. I just randomly decide I'm going to cut my hair. I get on the phone. I find a hairdresser within a 20-minute drive, and I just show up and I'm like, do what you want, and walk out, and I'm fine. And I've had some of the best haircuts and some of the worst haircuts. And I know that that's a very strange thing for a woman in her 40s to not have a hairdresser. But that's just who I am. And Friday night, I was in another city 3 hours away, and I was like, I think I want a haircut. It's like 6 o'clock at night on a Friday. I have not cut my hair since last summer. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to find someone. So I just like searched a mall nearby, found a hair salon, just sort of phoning to see if I could get in. I get in, I show up. And it's this engineer from China who can't be an engineer in Canada. And so he became a hairdresser. So if you want the most perfect haircut, he is your guy because he's an engineer. And the shampoo massage was very calculated. And I actually had to try really hard not to giggle because you could tell he was doing like like this weird like pattern to make sure he hit every single spot on my head. And the whole time I'm trying not to laugh because I'm like, this is such a cool experience. But we were sitting there, we were talking as he's cutting my hair. And, I don't ever really give an opinion. I'm just like, whatever, just do what you think is going to look good because I'm curious what hairdressers are going to do. And he's like, we should dye your hair. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we need to dye your hair. And I was like, what? You don't like my gray? So for the listeners, I have like the weirdest gray hair you've ever seen. Like it's like this white, gray, blonde, odd combo hair. And it's natural. It's just my natural hair. And he goes, you would fit in more. And this woman at the chair next to him, she's probably like 55, 60, cutting someone's hair. And oh, did she get mad? She heard him say this and she's like, how dare you tell her that? And I couldn't stop laughing. And I said, no, it's okay. I get this often. And I said, would it make you more comfortable if I fit in? And it really caught him off guard. He went, oh, yes, because in Chinese culture, that matters. And I said, cool, then you should dye your hair. And it just brought up so many thoughts for me when I was driving away after. And yes, the haircut's fine. It's good. I'm good now for another, 8, 9, 10 months until I decide to randomly get some stranger to cut it again, which drives my husband insane, by the way. But it was a really interesting moment of like, I need to fit in to make you happy. I need to fit in to make you comfortable because me being different makes you feel unsafe. And I can't stop thinking about it. Like it's been like 3 or 4 days now. And I'm like, how much does that show up in our lives? And we have no idea. Because I get comments all the time on my gray hair where people are like, whew, I would dye it. And other people are like, oh my gosh, where did you get that done? I want to have your hair. Right. And I always laugh. I'm like, Mother Nature and God, you just have to have a brain aneurysm at 17 and you get gifted magical colored hair. Right. But it's so interesting. Like, it's so interesting how something that's just different creates such strong emotions in people. It's one of the reasons why I leave it.
Just to get a good reaction out of people, just see how they react, how they feel about it. That's a good take on it. Well, it is strange. Here's my take on that. I think when other people see things that are other than what they are prepared for, I think it makes them like they start to reevaluate themselves. Like, well, what's going on with me? Am I actually out of the mold? Am I not okay? Is this not? So so many people are used to just being in that box and is comfortable getting in that box because you know what your role is, you know how to show up, and you could just keep lather, rinse, repeat. And there is like there's not there's benefits to that. There certainly is. Like we were talking a little bit before about entrepreneurs and time and stuff like that, but that it's crazy how people react to anything that seems a little outside the norm. Though that's how you excel in anything. You have to be different inevitably to stand out and to lead or to accelerate, to enhance yourself. You must stand out from the crowd in order to do so, which is mind-boggling.
I had a client years ago and we were doing some pretty intense trauma work together. And because of her history in her past and her training and other therapists that she'd worked with, she made this comment one day and she was mad, like just mad at me. And I was like, wow, you are pissy today. Like, what is going on? And she's like, I just can't put you in a box. And I said, explain. And she's like, I can't put you in the coach box or the psychologist box or the therapist box. Like, everybody in my life fits in a box and it works. And she's like, you just don't fit in a box. And I was like, so make a different box. She was like, what do you mean? And I said, every time I shock you, every time you're jarred by something I say, every time I do something that doesn't fit in the box of who you think I am, every time I'm unique, every time I'm different and you can't handle it, or you don't know how to deal with it, or you have no control over it, I was like, put it then in that box. I said, but I literally want you to go to a dollar store, buy a box, and then I want you to like attach stuff to it. Put like a spike out the side and cut holes in it and like make this like really weird shaped box that does not fit on any shelf or stack easily. Set it on the corner of your table and write it down every time and just put it in the box so that you can have a box. And I talked to her about it years later, and she's like, that was one of the most powerful things ever because it was like, she's just a weird box. Like, she's just a very different shaped box. And that's okay too.
I like that exercise because I think it challenges the individual to stretch their mind beyond what is possible. And not like, again, you talked about like you don't fit in a box, but remembering that all those boxes were just terms that some other thing in society eventually came up with, coach, therapist, all of those,
100%.
they just came up with it at some point. Like until a certain point, those things didn't exist either until they did. Like the same way the iPhone didn't exist until one day it did, and you couldn't really describe it. And now they had to come up with like, it's a smartphone. Well, it's apparently a lot more than that. So, like
Yeah.
I'm not brand loyal or anything like that, but that's the because I think so many people just land themselves. Even I would even go so far as to say she was still just struggling to find what's her own blend between all those things. So of course, not being able to put you in one inevitably is showing her own inabilities to allow herself to float between whatever roles that she's in her own life. And that's important. Like, how do we deal with this fluid space of roles and responsibilities? Because are we just our jobs, or are we just like? I think I think that simple exercise in and of itself really highlights how much humans struggle to grapple with just
Who am I?
being. Yeah. Well, let's lean into that because this is how I like to actually lean into the introductions. So before we go into that part, you know yourself better than I. So let's share with the audience, Dawn, who are you?
I am a scrappy, feisty fighter who's had a beautifully horrific life and a horrifically beautiful life. What that's created is a marriage of, I mean, we've been together 28 years as of what, 2, 3 weeks from now, and married for 24 and still love each other, which I say because not many couples that have been together this long actually still love each other. But the reason why we're still functioning, and my husband and I have talked about it, is that I'm a scrappy fighter. I'm scrappy. And I'm like, no, I'm going to fight for this because I refuse to become a statistic. My day job is as a trauma specialist. So I work with people, anything from depression and anxiety, all the way up to people that were raised in cults and people that have had multiple personalities and people that are dealing with leaving abusive relationships. Like I've had clients where we had cops and judges and like armed guards involved, right? To the people that are like, I don't know what to do with my business because I just kind of created this thing and I don't know how to find a client, and I need help with some of the marketing and the psychology stuff around it. But I also am the world's coolest aunt, and I am the crazy gardener that plants 35 dahlias in my spare bedroom every February, which I didn't this year because I'm breaking my rule on that and my idea on that. So I was like, I don't want to become known as that. I'm going to stop doing that for a year. But, and I like baby my plants for months before I can put them in the ground. I'm also weirdly spontaneous and love a crazy long road trip by myself to challenge my thoughts and challenge my brain. And I'm always looking to pick a scab. And what I mean by that is if I ever find an area of my life or a little thing that I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable and that makes me uncomfortable, I'm like, ooh, I like this. How can I challenge myself in this? And that kind of sums me up.
Just kind of, only a little bit.
Just
Just
kind of.
one thing I liked about, I get a beautiful response because I ask that question the same way every time, and it gets a very different response all the time. One of the things I wanted to highlight there, how do you say it? Horrifically beautiful and beautifully horrific, or maybe not in that same order.
Yep.
I think the way you answered that, or just that line in of itself, shows the duality of every situation that we come across in life. And it also shows the power of how we choose to view our life and the experiences that we go through. And they equally have powerful lessons and beautiful things if we look for it. Like classic glass half full. But there can be the glass half empty, like, oh shit, some dark shit went down. Like, that sucks.
Or the third
And
one, which is glasses are refillable. That's how they work. So just
yeah,
refill it. That's
yeah.
that's that's one of my like mine when people are like, are you more glasses half empty or glasses half full? I'm like, just refill it because that's how cups work. When a door closes, open a window, I'm like, no, doors have doorknobs. Just open it back up. Like, like why do we have to have this like flowy, flowery way to justify something that's gone down or gone wrong in life? It's like, no. I'm quite literal. Can you tell?
Well, even just those responses show that you like to look for the, it's almost like, how do you find a way to bend the rules, whether, and realize that there wasn't really rules to begin with. And I kind of, that it's been continually showing across the board, like, oh, consistent, like, here's another way to look at this scenario as opposed to A or B. Didn't, that's what most people will just take it as, like, oh, I've only been given A or B. That's fine. Well, what if maybe there's also another option? Maybe think about, I think Google does like a crazy job interview, but they're looking for people who think outside the box. I was like, you probably would crush it at that interview. Like, how do you look at weird problems and then like come up with bizarre solutions that no, but you need people who think differently to answer
Welcome
those
to
things.
how I work with clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always outside of the box in a weird way.
Well,
People always say I'm unconventional.
you definitely are unconventional. So let's like share us a little of your story, because I think your story lends itself to, it's like, oh well, of course she thinks unconventionally. Of course she approaches things unconventionally, because you had some very profound experiences that I think in and of itself shows perseverance and all those other things that come along with that. And through those experiences allows you the ability to see all the current things from a different lens. So yeah, share the story, your story with the audience.
So it's been kind of insane. I did write a book about it because there's a lot. P.S. I made it. And I can send you a copy. Let me know and I could totally send you a copy. But
That'd be great. Yeah.
I was born to this beautiful, amazing family, middle child, but born to a mom who rejected me her entire pregnancy. From her own postpartum depression, from struggles with my older sibling, literally the only picture that I have of us in the hospital together, I am laying on her lap, not even in her arms, and she looks completely dejected. It is the most brutal photo. And I don't know if you do show notes, but I'd be willing to send it to you. Like, it's just, when the first time I saw it, I was just like, whoa, that explains a hell of a lot about my childhood. And so, in my mom's words, she hated me so much by the time I was born, she didn't know how to love me. And it took almost 2 years before she could touch me without physically retching. And the reason why I say that is we learn how to love and we learn how to bond in utero. And those were two things I struggled with my entire life. And until I learned that, I always believed I was broken and that there was something wrong with me. When I realized that, I was like, okay, that explains the whole, like, so much of the trajectory of my life. By 12, I had broken my back, top six, bottom six vertebrae. I had a drowning accident where someone actually had to dive in and rescue me. At 14, I was sexually abused by an uncle 14 times over 2 days and not believed. At 15, I attempted suicide. I actually died. Or no, 15, I had a severe eating disorder, down to 87 pounds, trying to make myself ugly enough that no one would want to touch me again. By 16, I had a brain aneurysm. Or sorry, there's a lot of things that went down. By 16, I attempted suicide and I ate 3 bottles of extra strength Tylenol and I actually died and they found me and revived me. And I was pissed. Let me tell you, you want to see someone angry, revive them when they actually wanted to be dead. The psychologists did not know how to deal with that because they're like, but it was a cry for help. I was like, nope, I just failed again. And at 17, and I'm talking like 3 years in a row, I was in the hospital. At 17, I had a brain aneurysm and almost died. And the chances of surviving a brain aneurysm at that point was 1 in 750,000 people survived a brain aneurysm. And out of that, 1 in 100,000 would survive without massive defects. So I spent my 18th birthday in a hospital bed with my head cut open. And I had to relearn everything after. I had to relearn, like, I had lost all my long-term memory. I had lost all my short-term memory. I didn't even know my husband's name. We were dating at the time for a couple of years. I didn't even know his name. I kept calling him the wrong name. Like, I knew who he was, but I didn't know. My skin color, my hair color, my eye color, my voice, my personality, everything changed. And then I was given this gift of fear. And yes, I call it a gift now. I was told that 50% of people died of a second brain aneurysm within 10 years and nobody made 20. So I went on to live in fear. D-Day. I had a D-Day on my life where every year I would have this massive migraine on the date. I think I was going to die. I would take the day off work. I'd lay in bed just like waiting because I was like, okay. Because as a 17, 18-year-old, that's how literally your brain goes. Like your brain goes to that. And on the 10-year mark, I was like, oh, okay, now I'm living on borrowed time. I've beat 50% of the people and now I'm living on borrowed time. But add to that the fact that I went on to deal with infertility. I went on to deal with a drug addiction needed because of a hysterectomy. And I was coming off like, I'm talking like 40 milligrams of Butrans patch a day, which is legalized heroin, and 26 Percocet a day minimum. For 9 months, I had a rehab off of that. My mom passed away in a car accident. My dad walked away from us. Like, never mind my husband's health journey. And I write about all this in my book, but I had a really insane life, like a genuinely really insane life. And on top of that, I'm terrified to die. After having been so close so many times, I still am playing Russian roulette every single day with a half-loaded gun. And I hit the 20-year mark. And I remember waking up and looking at my husband and going, I'm alive. And he went, yeah. And he knew this, right? He knew this big fear because he had lived with it for all these years. And I was like, oh boy. And it started this weird journey of who am I without a D-Day? When you don't have a deadline day, when you don't have that date ahead of you, everything. I wrote my book in year 19 because it needed to be done before I died so that if anyone wanted to know my story, that it was still out there for people. I did a photo shoot 3 days before that date so they'd have new funeral photos. Not even joking. We had life insurance policies that would be done at 20 years because it didn't matter, because at that point I'm going to be dead anyway. So we didn't need to keep paying after that. Had never thought about retirement, had never thought about like, how do you actually create true relationships with people? Because what's the point? I'm going to be dead anyways, and they're just going to be upset. So that's hold everybody at arm's length my whole life. And I had to now overcome that and figure out like, okay, what does it look like to actually live? What does it look like to actually believe that I could live till I'm 100? And so I went and did all of the testing, all of the scans, everything. And sat with my doctor at one point, and I had a nurse practitioner, a naturopath, and my medical doctor, and all three of them did different testing. All three of them sat with me and went, Dawn, you are so healthy. Like so crazy healthy. Like everything you've done for preventative maintenance to last 20 years has set you up for success. Like go and live. Like you are going to be okay now. And it was this beautiful, terrifying gift. And it became this thing where it was like, but I'm supposed to be dead. How do I do this? How do I build my company? How do I work with people? Like, how do I do this when I'm supposed to be dead? It almost felt like this like weird guilt and shame attached to being alive. And I was almost pissed off at it in a weird way. It was like, no, but I don't have to worry about what I want to do for retirement because I'm supposed to be dead. Now I have to think about being an adult. Now I have to think of these things and be responsible. And it's been a very, very interesting journey over these last 6 years. April 5th is 26 years since the brain aneurysm. And I think honestly, this is the first year that I'm not going into it with any fear. That I'm actually going into it with excitement, and I'm going into it going like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm still alive. But through all of that, it started at, I was 14 the first time I told my best friend, I have to figure out how to make this into something beautiful or it's going to kill me. I have to figure out a positive in this, and I have to figure out, and not gratitude. This is not being grateful for things that have happened to me, because let me tell you, if I could go back and erase most of it, I probably would. Let's be perfectly frank about that. But it was also looking back at it and being like, no. How do I find the beauty in this? And how do I turn this into something that could help somebody else one day? Because otherwise, what was the point? So I did an exercise about 4 years ago where I sat down and I went back through all my childhood photos again. My mom was an avid photo taker. And I started rewriting the story of my childhood. And guess what didn't make the photo album? There weren't pictures of the uncle that abused me. There weren't pictures of me in the hospital with 87 staples in my head. There weren't pictures of any of those things. There were pictures of like going camping and laughing and playing with my cousins as a little kid, and pictures of me and my mom laughing together and hugging each other, even though we had the most disconnected relationship right to the day she died. There were pictures of me and my husband, and I rewrote my childhood to find the horrifically beautiful, because it had always been there. Right? Our brains automatically go to a place of negative. That's how we're genetically wired from conception. That's just safety and security for us, right? But I was redoing it, and I actually printed it as a book, and it was like Dawn's childhood. And my husband looked at it and he's like, you would never know that that girl had lived your life. And I said, nope. But I chose every single time something came up, I chose to fight. I chose to fight. And that, I think, is it's the scrappiness of me, right? It's when I say that I'm scrappy and I'm a fighter. When COVID first hit, one of my friends phoned me and he's like, Dawn, is this like a universe hold my beer moment for you? Like, you've been through so much in your life. This is just like, yeah, whatever. Let's quarantine. And I started laughing and I said, yeah, I'm not really fazed by big things that happen these days. Like, big stuff can show up in my life. I'm like, all right, let's go again. Because I know my muscles, I know my resilience, I know how scrappy I am. And there's always an option C, D, E, and F. I will find it. Right? But yeah. So do I have a story that's lent to my having a unique personality and my scrappiness? Yeah. just just a little bit. But you know what? It's a choice. Choice to not have it be my identity anymore.
I think that's worth anybody who struggles with that kind of stuff realize, like, that little nugget you just said right there is very powerful, because the more I also kind of do similar types of work things, eventually realize like it's always an identity problem. because you build your life based on the foundation of how you view yourself. And until you do that, until you restructure that, like, you're going to keep restructuring and recreating the same problem just in a different lens
Over and over.
over and over every single time. I thought that exercise of going back and rewriting your story was really interesting. And kind of the thought that first came to my mind as I heard it as like maybe kind of an analog is that the classic time heals all wounds concept. When you get enough time, you eventually just get, I don't know, the more I talk to older people, it's like they only really just focus on mostly the good things. Like you remember the good stuff. Yeah, there's shitty stuff, but you'll let most of the stuff go. What am I carrying around? Why am I going to keep carrying this thing around? That is not helping me. But I think the effort to go face it and then deliberately choose to be like, these are the things I'm going to focus on. I think that fast tracks the process of healing because you can visually see, wait, let me go look for the good. There's always good stuff. If you just look long enough, you'll find something. Don't get me wrong, you're going to go feel some shit too. Usually when you go diving through the past, like you're going to go, you have to sort things out.
Can I give your audience the logistics of exactly what I did if they want to do it themselves?
Yes, please.
I went back through almost 100,000 photos. And here's what I did. Every single year, I looked at them by year. And I had a journal beside me. And I had 2 files on my computer. And I would just like copy and paste them in there. And one was like my amazing parts of my childhood, and one were my hard parts of my childhood. And any picture, like there was a photo that was taken 2 days before the big suicide attempt. And you can see the brokenness in my eyes. But I had invited a bunch of friends over kind of as a goodbye. And when I saw that photo, I felt her hurt. I felt it through every core of my being. And I went right back to that moment. I was like, holy cow, that was that day. That was the day that I invited them all over to say goodbye because I knew my life was going to be done the next day or 2 days later. And what I did was I allowed myself for every year. I journaled what I was going through that year, and I journaled who I felt I had to be, what my beliefs were that were developed that year, what the traumas were that happened that year, the hurt that happened. And I grieved for that child. I grieved for that teen. I grieved for that young woman in that year. So I allowed myself to cry. I allowed myself to rage. I allowed myself to feel the feels of what she needed first, to almost like clear space, because it's not about burying the dark. It's not about burying those things. No, you have to actually let them out. Right? I often use the metaphor of a fridge where it's like you can have all the rotting food you want in your fridge. If you don't ever take it out, you can't just keep adding new fresh stuff and hope the smell goes away. Right? At some point, you've got to get the moldy food out. Right? And that means actually keeping your fridge door open long enough and gagging through it to get to the containers to get them out, or the produce. And we've all, if you have ever had a fridge, you know that feel. Right? And that's where I allowed myself to process like 1 year at a time. And then in that created the new photo album piece of like, but look at all of the amazings that happened that year. Look at all of the beautiful things that happened that year. Oh, look, I won an award for something. Oh, look, I did something cool. Oh, look. And it was like, hey, wait. I remember going on that sports trip and getting in so much trouble for sneaking out in the middle of the night to swim in the pool at the hotel. Like, oh my goodness, I remember that, right? And after letting go of some of that hurt, it allowed the power to happen in the positive. It allowed me to feel them different. And then I went on to the next year and the next year and the next year. And I allowed myself to fully process right till present. To be like, no, it's okay. But there was like, you have to grieve the positive and the negative. You have to be willing to face both, or you're only looking at half the picture. Right? And allowing yourself to hurt for that little girl. Like, and part of it was like, what do I wish she had known? So in my journal, right, is the hard part. And then it was like, you know what? I wish that someone had told you this. I wish someone had gifted you this. I wish someone had given you a hug in this moment. And part of it was like, little Dawn, man, you're going to look back at this one day and be shocked at how amazing this year was. You're going to look back and think, that one hurt, that one massive hurt that you never thought you would get over became the thing that catapulted your business, that allowed you to help other people to heal, that allowed some other thing to happen in your life. Right? And that really solidified like the grieving piece for me of like, no, it's okay. Like, let's hurt, but now let's move forward. And yeah, I have it printed as a book. I also have it on my computer and I look through it every once in a while to remind myself to be like, I'm so glad I fought. I'm so glad every time a client has a massive success, every time something goes amazing in my life, every time there's a big win or a celebration, I go back and I look at that album. And it's to look at that little girl again, to be like, yeah, that's right. There's a reason why you fought through the hard stuff. It was to get to this moment right now. So I call bullshit on everybody who says never look back at your past and just move forward and the whole windshield rearview mirror thing. No. I think that's one of the biggest lies we've ever said in self-help. It's not about sitting in your past, but you need to go back there to heal it. You need to look at it to know why you're moving forward. But we also need to look for our book of proof back there. And what I mean by that is we often think today's going to be the hardest day of my life and I'm never going to get through this moment. Guess what? It's only in your past you can find all the moments that you've gotten through. All the hard things you've overcome, all of the struggles you've overcome, all of this is going to be the worst day of my life and I'm never going to get over it moments. And yet you're still here and you survived. That's your book of proof. Your past is your book of proof of everything you've overcome. And that builds out your proof to look forward to be like, I kind of overcame all of this. Pretty sure nothing that shows up now will be worse. Right? I got sick a couple years ago, about 2.5 years ago. I was diagnosed with a super rare thyroid disease. I ended up with severe mold poisoning from an island we lived on, actually. And my body was shutting down. My organs were shutting down. Doctors were freaking out. It was bad. We'll put it that way. It was real bad. And I got diagnosed with this rare thyroid disease, and where my body does hyper and hypothyroidism at the same time. And it was right on the verge of it being Graves and Hashimoto's at the same time. Like they were like, you're right on the edge of having both. So you need to get your health under control now, or else you're in trouble. And everybody in my life was like, nope, shut down your business. You can't have any stress. You can't do this. You can't do that. And my medical doctor was like, yep. He's like, you should go on long-term disability and go on all these steroids and do all these things to help this heal. He's like, but you're not. I know you better than that. He's like, go figure out how to fix your health. And I did. And it was because I didn't buy into the box A and the box B. And I was like, really, this? Like, I overcame an aneurysm and I'm going to let like a thyroid thing stop me? No, I'm just going to figure it out. Right? So did my world slow down for a little bit while I healed? Yeah. But I'm also the girl, and my naturopath still talks about it. He's like, you're also the girl that demanded an office in my clinic, and we'd hook you up for your start of your 8 hours of IVs, and you just had your clients coming into the clinic and doing work with you while you're hooked up to an IV bag. And I was like, well, yeah, wasn't dead. I was just sick. Right? But that scrappiness, that's where that shows up, that I've got to figure out a way to make this good. I've got to figure out a way to overcome this. And I refuse to take no for an answer. I look at it as like, no, but there's always like something else. Okay, so maybe this isn't going to work, but I bet you there's something else. Right? And that's just, I don't know, for anyone listening, that would be my challenge to you is don't put a period at the end of no.
I love the exercise. I love the exercise. Ironically, something I've been challenging several of my clients of late to do something very similar. And I agree with you. I also think there's something powerful when you write it down. It
Oh,
takes the sting out of it.
and
Like,
not on your laptop. I'm not saying type it out. Pen to paper, people. Come on.
well, I'm somebody who writes it down on my laptop more because it's easier for me to get into flow state. But more the effort of like once you see it visually, we have all these thoughts and feelings banging around in our head and our heart, but there's nothing concrete that you can I feel like we're more tactile than we want to give ourselves credit for. We want to
So
and
much
once it's
so.
out there, now we can like put some other senses to it. We can move it around a little bit. You can push delete on some stuff. Like you could do something with it. And I mean, that's why journaling has been one of the most profound exercises people have been using forever. Just to take the thoughts out of your head and then look at it again. Yeah, it still might feel a certain kind of way, but
Mhm.
not the same intensity.
Same.
And then you read it and then you start to ask deeper questions like, well, what did I learn from this? Now all of a sudden you're shifting your intention about how you're going to get to the information. And you go, well,
Yeah.
especially if you're going like, well, I'm looking for something like a lesson to help other people. Oh, that's positive. Okay. So you're shading that just a little more positive now. And then all of a sudden you reframe your past. And especially, I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of high performers, whatever you want to call that, always tend to deal with perfectionism and fear of
Oh,
failure and just like self-worth shit like all the time. That stuff, when you look back, and I'm speaking from personal experience here too, so I'm not gonna exclude myself from this and be like I never did that. For sure, I can attest to what you're talking about here is that you go start looking at all your failures through a very different lens. You're going, oh, that's perfect. Like you just said before, like this set me up for this moment. Oh, that's why I can understand what's going on here. You don't, I think it also softens and gives, I think this approach you're talking about here gives you permission to try again and go seek, as you said before, like perhaps we were only looking at options A and B in the past. Well, now you realize those two options didn't work. Inevitably have to look for option C now or D or whatever. It challenges you to look at new approaches, perhaps to the same problem, simply because you're now more aware of yourself and the well-examined life gives you all the clues for where you want to go if you really care. And I think there's also, how did you say before, but it opens up the future for you more or less, saying like, well, they're inevitably always, I feel like we're always in this pursuit of the ultimate purpose for ourselves, though it reveals itself the more you can look back. You have more of a timeline, you're able to think longer, though it's retrospective, but then like you flip it on its head, now you can kind of look to the future like these 12 decisions here all led to this after 5 years. Well, I
yeah.
should probably, at least now I figured out what 5 years down the line looks like if I go this path. So what's the one tweak I would do to at least go beyond 5 years? I think it's just such a beautiful exercise in allowing you to better forecast, to better prepare, to better. I mean, you keep talking about scrappiness. I love that because what really I think makes you is more resilient because you can become more aware of all the other problems that might come up from our decisions. You can be more, you can better serve other people because you can simply guide them through saying like, no, live there, live that, got it. What you're doing, I promise you, this is going to just nuke itself. You're not going to want to do that. Just take this little step this way, and you're gonna be all right. Like, you can come from such a greater place of service. And go figure, the people that have done the greatest things in this world have usually gone through some pretty shitty stuff to be able to say like, hey, I've still overcome. Like we don't, somebody who just lived like a very like mundane life. Like what is there really, there's not a lot of triumphs. I mean, being alive is worthy of just celebrating, but the big monumental, like impactful things often come from those people who endured the hardships to share the lessons of the darkness with the world so everybody else can benefit. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. That's kind of like my take on everything I'm hearing with everything you're sharing right now.
Sure. One thing I would add to that is sometimes there's no reason for why something's happened. And I think that that is something too, is everyone's always looking for the lesson. They're looking for like, how can I use this to support people? How can I? And I think that that almost attracts more sometimes because we're constantly looking for those lessons. So that is the other thing that I would challenge people on is I always looked at what, like, yes, how could I turn this around and use this? But what is the positive in this? And so, like, I know that sounds wild, but I was like having a brain aneurysm. Like, do you know how much school I got to skip at the end of grade 12? Like, I hardly had to go to school for April, May, and June. Like, let's just put that out there, right? It was just a positive. It was a completely ridiculous positive, but it was a positive. And it wasn't always about like, oh my goodness, how am I going to turn this into something big? And how am I going to do that? Because sometimes when I look back at my past, I'm like, no, something shitty just happened to me and that's it. It doesn't need to have any more meaning than that. I just ended up being in the wrong place at the wrong time to break my back. Right? Nothing about that is like, oh my goodness, now I'm going to become a back specialist and I have to use this for something. No, but I can sure tell you what the weather is going to be for a very long time from now because I can feel it in my top 6, bottom 6 vertebrae. Like if it doesn't snow here in the next 24 hours, I'll be shocked because there's a weather shift happening right now. And let me tell you which vertebrae is telling me that because it's yelling at me right now. Right. And I think that that's part of it too, is giving ourselves permission to be like, no, it just was a bad day. That was just a thing. And I don't actually have to find meaning in everything. Right. Because there's a fine line. There's a fine line of, right. Some of us do. Some of us are like, nope, I found meaning. This is how I'm going to work with this. This is what I'm going to do. Hilariously, like I never set out to do this job. People always think I had this like big aha moment and went and did all this training and set out to help people heal. No, not at all. Not at all. Like, didn't ever think I would do this for work. Actually, I had no desire to. It was some volunteer work I was doing quietly on the side. It was thousands of hours of training that I took to heal my brain. But I'd like to say that it was from a good place. No, it's because I thought that every psychologist sucked ass and they weren't getting me results. And I had been fighting for my mental health for so long. And I realized that I needed to figure out a different way to deal with it because my brain functioned different than anyone I could find that was trying to help me. So it was out of a scrappiness, it was out of a defiance that I even started to heal my brain. I owned a restaurant franchise. Like I was not thinking of anything around this at all. And it was only when I had been volunteering, I was part of a documentary on Building Be Brave. If you go on YouTube, you can find it. It's literally called Building Be Brave. It's for little warriors, a treatment center for sexually abused kids. And I quietly went and volunteered every single Saturday helping build it. Nobody knew. I wasn't posting it anywhere. Like it was just a thing. And they asked me to be part of a documentary. And this is literally how my business started. My very first trauma client. So I'd been helping people with business stuff prior because I had a lot of business experience. But I'd like go for coffee with someone and help them figure out like how to find your ideal client and how to market yourself. And you need to send out an RFP to all these people, request for proposal for anyone who doesn't know the term, right? Like I was helping with that stuff. And it was a woman who sat with me and it had just come out with a family trauma. And she was in her hotel room the night before and happened to see me on Channel 10 talking about being sexually abused for part of this documentary. And she sat in this meeting and cried to me and asked me for some advice for her daughter. And I said, hey, give her my number. Like, I'd love to talk to her about this. And she's like, could I hire you to be a support for her? I was like, kind of weird, but yeah, okay. And you can read her testimonial on my website, like, and on Google, like we ended up doing totally crazy, intense trauma work together. And that was when it was like, oh, wait, I actually have skills in this. Like I could actually do this as a career and help people. Right. So my journey of how I used my trauma, not what anybody would think. Not what anybody would think. And so for anyone listening, you might have overcome things. You might have so much resilience it would blow people's minds. And you're like, but I want to work at Starbucks. Like I don't actually want to help people. Good. rock on, man. Work at Starbucks. Right? But we need to heal for us. We need to heal for future us. We need to heal for our kids. We need to heal for all of these other things as well, but also so that like we're not living in the depths of the hell of our soul and scared of it. Right? What makes me different than someone else? I always jokingly say, because I've actually been to my icky bits. Like I've shone a light in the dark spots. I've gone, I've cleared it out, I've cleaned it out, and I know the pathway to get through it. And I'm not scared of it anymore. So when someone comes to me with like insane, crazy things, you're like, what the hell? Like I have clients that are like, I don't know how you do this every day, listening to stories like this. And I'm like, yeah, but I've been there and I've healed that. I'm not scared of this journey because I got the map. Like I know how to get there. Right. And I do think that we can do beautiful things with it. But I think that we need to not underestimate the fact that just healing and the ricochet effect that can have within our inner circle even is so powerful. You can shift the trajectory of your family, your coworkers, your friends more than you could possibly imagine by doing the work.
I love that. And the thought that came to mind as you were sharing some of those things right there at the end, especially, is that when you've been in the darkness, you can sit in the darkness with somebody else and not like freak out. Which what I'm coming
Yes.
to realize is that's what really people want. They want to be like, I don't want to say it's like it's normalized, but like the feeling that you're feeling like shit and like you've gone through some dark shit, that's like people go like that happened and it's normal to be able um to process it. It's normal to like to normalize the feelings of fear and the experience of like, oh, I'm grieving something. Like that's normal to do that and it's okay. So you're basically giving them permission. But if you don't feel strong enough internally, which inevitably, as you're saying all those things, is by going and investigating and healing your own stuff, you are more sound internally, more grounded internally, and the space you're able to hold for others inevitably gets deeper. You can ask questions that allows people to go where they need to go, and you're not going to freak out, which is what they're really looking for somebody like, wow, like why do I feel like I could just tell you all these things and like I feel like you've probably gotten this all the time. Where I feel like I've known you forever. Like I'd never tell this to anybody. That kind of stuff. Like
All the time.
that's the stuff that happens when you sort your
Yeah.
own shit out. People are like, I'm willing to just tell you stuff because I think there's another side to it. Is that I think there's an empathy piece where you also are like, I'm not going to do anything with this information to harm you because you feel comfortable enough being like, no, this is an integritous. Like I understand what this feels like. So out of integrity, I'm not going to damage you. I'm gonna respect what just happened there. So I think there's a
But
double.
also, but
Go ahead.
also like a lot of people that have lived through a lot of trauma, they're scared to tell their story because their story might hurt someone.
Mm, mm,
Right? Like I remember sitting in a psychologist's office and I'd like be like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And like their jaws dropping, and you're like, oh shit, I'm too much for you. You don't know how to handle this, you don't know how to deal with this. Or when you go to tell a friend or a family member or something that's gone down and it triggers something in them or it hurts them, you don't want to hurt people.
mm,
And so when someone tries to talk to you, clients always laugh because they're like, they'll tell me like they're like, get ready. And I'm like, yeah, okay, go. Like what happened? And at the end, I'm always like, okay. They're like, no, like that's pretty bad. And I'm like, didn't make the trophy, man, not even the top 10. So let's do the work. And they always laugh. They're like, that's hilariously comforting to know I didn't make the top 10. Like I'm not the worst of the worst that you've ever seen. But it also makes them feel safe because they're like, oh, okay, okay, people have had worse. We're good. We're good. We can do this. Right? Because we don't want to. We don't want to hurt people with our hurt. And so often we feel like we're too much. We feel like we're too much for people. And it's like, how do you date when you don't know how to tell your story, but you have a pretty intense story that's going to affect parts of your dating relationship?
mm.
Right? Because you get desensitized to it and you don't know how to even talk about it now. Right? And so there's pieces of that even that Like I've had friends phone me and they're like, okay, so I need to explain this to somebody, but I know that if I say it in the way I would normally say it, it's going to be incredibly jarring. Can you give me words? I just need words on how to explain this to somebody so that they get it, but I'm not going to destroy them. And I just laugh and I'm like, yeah, I'll text you some words to use.
I feel
Right?
like
Because
in
that's a
this,
piece of it. That's a piece of it. It's like, how do you tell your story? How do you explain why you are the way you are and not jar or trigger all the people around you, especially when it's really graphic and everybody's idea of what trauma is different, and everybody's idea of what severe is different, and it's everyone's is their truth. But yeah, like these are all parts of healing that I don't think most people think about.
no, I don't think people think about it because I don't think most people are even aware of what's going on. And that's
No.
something I get love like to get your take on this. I can't remember who did I hear it from first, but it's stuck with me. It's been probably 5, 7 years, something like that now, or since I've heard it. And the way it was said, like most things are done out of ignorance, not malice. And for some
Oh,
reason, that's really stuck with me because now you start to go like, well, and you start looking around at people. You're like, most people are just not completely unaware of their own behaviors. They don't even not only that, they don't even know how to become aware of their own
yeah.
behaviors. So the things are just happening, and to react to them, if you're more of an aware person because you do more self investigation and are more introspective, it's still also understanding like that person just doesn't know what the fuck is going on. They're just going through their day, and it might be a bull in a china shop, or it just might be the tiptoeing through things. Like it, I don't know where I was going with the rest of my thought there, but I'd like to get some of your take on some of that.
You know what? I often say when someone's like, yeah, but my story is not as bad as yours, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, no, no. I could not be more grateful for the fact or happier for the fact that you have not had to live my life. Like, that's beautiful. And I think part of it is like the intention behind it. If somebody is actually just being ignorant and they don't want to know, I mean, she'll never listen to this. So I'm going to say this. My mother in law, ignorant. She just doesn't want to know. She fully, her intention is to not actually know. So she doesn't actually have to face it or understand. And so the comments that have come out of her mouth in the last 28 years would shock somebody. Like it is ignorance to the nth degree. And not due to her lack of her own trauma or knowing what's happened to me or knowing what's happened to her own kids or anything. She is just very firmly in that space. Wendy, if you ever hear this, I love you. But there's also people that, like one of my best friends, I call her my white fluffy bunny friend. She genuinely has just not ever experienced it and never had people in her inner world that have experienced it. And we joke about it to this day. The greatest trauma she's ever had was reading my book. And she's a graphic designer and she was doing all the formatting on it. And she'd phone me and she'd be like sobbing. And she's like, this is what people are dealing with. And it was of no ill will, of no ill intention. She had just actually never faced it. It had never, ever come up in her world. How do we begrudge someone that? How do we be mad at someone for that? Right?
You
Do we
can't.
just like, do we traumatize someone so that they have more emotional intelligence around the issue? No. And I think that's where we need to have more grace as the people that have dealt with the traumas. We are the ones who need to have more grace. And I know that people are not going to like this, but we do. We need to have more grace and understanding of like, hey, maybe they've never actually been here and they don't know. And they don't know how to deal with it. And they don't know how to process it. And they don't know what to say. And I'm going to release them of that expectation that I have on them. Right. So my very dear friend, if the world is falling apart around me, she doesn't know how to handle it. She has no idea because she's never been there. Literally, her greatest trauma was reading my book. Has it helped her understand other people better? 100% yes. But when I started dealing with those health issues, she was also the person that I'd be like, hey, I need someone to just come sit with me and tell me ridiculous stories and make me laugh. Because she could do that, right? We need to teach people how to treat us. And that is this beautiful gift that we have, is once we understand our trauma, we understand what we've been through and we've healed, or even not healed, but we understand it, then we can be like, hey, this is what I need from you. Can you do that? Because I get that you don't know. Right? When I was dealing with the thyroid stuff, I had people that just kind of pieced out. It didn't mean they hated me. It didn't mean that they didn't love me. It didn't mean that they didn't understand. They actually genuinely just didn't know how to deal with it. And I gave them that grace. Yet I had other friends that have dealt with major health issues with people in their lives. And those were the guys that would call me and be like, hey, I'm going to come pick you up from your IV. You're going to come and sit on my couch. I'm going to cover you with a blanket and then we're going to feed you. And you just get quiet time at our house because you need people around you to just be there if you need anything. They got that. Right. But the friend who's like, hey, go for dinner. I got a group of friends together. And I was like, I just sat through 7 hours of IVs and I feel like I'm dying right now. No, I can't. And then they're mad because they take it as rejection. I can choose to be mad at them, or I can choose to go, oh, they really just have no idea what this is like. And I think that's where we need to take ownership. We need to take ownership of what's going on around us. And we also need to realize that, so a judgment comes from a standard that's been set, right? So a situation has happened. We now create a standard on ourselves in that area of our lives, which creates expectations of it, right? So because of my health issues that I've had in my life, it's created a standard for who I am when someone else has a health issue, who I am in my own health issues, right? So now that creates expectations of myself, but also expectations that we then often put on other people. It's when they don't meet them that we have fear and then we judge them because they're bumping up against our standard, right? They're not meeting our expectations. And so that's where I think that society as a whole has put this idea out there that like, no, you need to figure out how to meet my needs right now. Instead of like, no, these are my needs and I need to figure out how to get them met. So now I'm going to ask your permission if you can step in and meet some of them. And then I'm going to teach you what I need.
I think that that's very important for people to hear, because the first thought of the hurt people situation is, I'm angry, I'm upset, you should all understand how I feel, so fuck you. And I'm gonna have to drag you into the mud for you to feel what it feels like to then like so now you understand how I feel. Well, that's now
Right?
you're hurting two people. That's not really helping the situation. Hard to
Totally.
say, especially if it's some bad shit. Like, that sucks. But two wrongs do not make a right. And I think that's something where a lot of people, where they're in that moment, I empathize with. They're definitely stuck in that fight or flight situation where that they haven't done it, they haven't been doing the work, classic, doing the work of self investigating, self healing, all that stuff. That's that new, it's like fresh. And I should say, like, there's plenty of people who let that sit for decades and are still just, adults and, or pardon, children in adult bodies that are
Totally.
replaying the same thing and have no desire to look in the mirror like, oh shit, maybe these things keep happening. Maybe people don't stay in my life because I'm still doing the stuff. The empathy you're talking about actually welcomes people in the space, and it doesn't force people to be dragged down in the mud. with you to have to go through the same pain, because I think, and there's another side of that. There's people who feel guilty because they haven't felt so much pain. I think you just brought that up a little bit at the beginning of that reflection
Some
as
people do.
well, which is, to me, is even also just as bizarre. It's like, you don't even allow yourself. I think one of the travesties there is, cool, you have these gifts and you didn't have to go, the classic dig yourself a hole. Well, why would you dig yourself a hole? Just, you could just start from here and do something more and do something greater with that. People should not be ashamed of their privileges. You can do something even more awesome because you're not having to go do other work to just get to this point. But for some reason, there's this societal, like, you have to go destroy yourself to
Oh my
build
gosh.
yourself. Like, we have to have some crazy hero's journey, or just, we could all just continue to get, like, life is already hard enough. There's already going to be shit.
Thank
Why are we
you.
making it harder
Right?
on ourselves to achieve greatness? That, I think there's just something very perverse around that. So I think what you brought up in your reflection there was so valuable for people to hear both sides of the equation. The guilt side of having gifts and not having gone through, like, I like what you said before, like, a client comes to you and says, like, my story is not as bad as yours, and you go, awesome, that's great. What, like, that's, wouldn't you want somebody to be like, that's great, I'm glad you didn't have to go through as much shit as I do, because I care more about us moving forward together even better.
But also, it doesn't make your hurt less.
True. Yeah.
Your truth is your truth. Talk to somebody who can't handle black table pepper because it's too spicy, and someone who eats habaneros like candy, and ask them what hot is. Their definition of hot are very different, but their truth is their truth, that their hot was hot.
That's a really good analogy. That's a
So
really
why
good analogy.
put a scale on our hurt? Your truth is your truth. I remember talking to a client years ago, and we were talking, and I said, so in your mind, have you had any trauma? And he's like, no, not really. He's like, no, I don't think I've had any trauma in my life. And I started laughing, and he goes, what? And I was like, just hear me out on this. I was like, you've literally in the last hour been talking about high points in your life, or points that could have caused you more stress, because I realized that he wasn't understanding that they could have been traumatic. It was just like high stress times. He had lived through multiple wars. He'd been abducted and held for, like, they were trying to harvest his organs. He had had like death, like if anybody else was to look at this guy's file, they'd be like, oh my word, has he lived through trauma? Not even a glimmer in his head. And it wasn't that he was denying it. He just didn't see those as really that bad. Where somebody else could have someone just insult them, and it sits in their body just as bad. It doesn't mean that one's worse than another. No, it's not about better or worse or bigger or smaller. No, no, no. It's how it affects you. So someone can come to me with like the quote unquote, hardly anything's gone down in comparison. And yet I can look at them and be like, yeah, and you're just as damaged as I was, because that hurt you the same way mine hurt me. It just looks different on paper, right? There isn't a scale. There isn't a scale out there of like, oh, that's a big hurt, that's a little hurt. You get more points. Congratulations, you cross over into a new level. No, because we don't know how something impacts someone. We have no idea how something impacts someone. You just heard probably 65% of the trauma that's happened in my life, because there's stuff I can't legally talk about. You want to know what has caused me more harm than any of the things that I mentioned? A conversation I walked in on with my mom and her sisters, talking about my body being overly developed and how my mom didn't know how to handle it. And should I cover up more around my cousins in the swimming pool when I was 9 years old? That single conversation has caused me more chaos in my life and hurt me at a deeper level than every other thing that I listed. Had I listed that in my list of traumas that have caused me to be where I am, people would be like, what? It was a conversation. And that one has caused me more problems. That has impacted me. When you look at the trajectory of my life, that single conversation that I overheard at 9 years old has impacted me more, has hurt decisions, has caused me body harm, has everything more than anything. So who are we to say someone's trauma is bigger than somebody else's? Because you don't know. You don't know which one is the one that's the kingpin that you're like, if we took that one out, if we healed that single little thing, little, right? Because it doesn't actually seem like a big one in a scale of life. What is the difference that that could make for somebody? It's never what we think it is. The thing that's holding us back, the thing that's our greatest trauma, the thing that we think damaged us the most is never the actual big one. Ever. And I've been doing this a lot of years. Like I've seen hundreds of people over the last 9 years, and it is never what they think it is. And I think that's where we need to stop judging, right? We need to stop the judgment and just get really curious and dig in a different way.
Yeah, I think we bring a lot of thoughts around empathy with this conversation. It's difficult to learn how to meet people where they're at. I talked to my mom about that the other day, and she's like, "Oh," and she didn't really understand the concept. And it was like, "Oh, well, everybody has a different version of how they think."
I don't think people do know what the concept is, though, because I think it's a vague self-help term that's been thrown around for years. And it's like, I sat at a conference one time and this woman was talking about like breathe into your spirit heart. And I was like, what the fuck? I breathe into my lungs. And I said it out loud by accident. And all these people around me burst out laughing. And someone's like, yeah, I'm really confused too. So even when we talk in these terms, what does it mean to meet someone where they're at? I think for me, it means when you can meet someone where they're at is to just sit with them, hear them out and be like, yeah, gotcha. We're good. Don't worry about it. Right? I'm not going to try to fix you if I'm not being hired to fix things, right? Or to work on things. I'm actually just going to be okay with exactly where you're at, even if it's really uncomfortable, but we have an open enough relationship that we can actually have that conversation.
I think even another part of what you're saying there, meeting somebody where they're at, how do you know where they're at unless you start to listen to where they're at? They have to literally tell you. You have to hold space, but she also didn't understand what hold space was either. I had to explain that. I was like, I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to listen. That's it. Sounds crazy.
See, but again, these are these vague terms. They drive me crazy, by the way.
But that was an enlightening moment for me where like in my day-to-day life, that makes sense to me. I understand what it means. I get what's going on, but to the layperson, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Oh, okay. That's just that alone. And which brings me to have a deeper appreciation of how can you find there's a beauty around finding very generic, obvious terms, which gets into like the marketing space. And how do you say it? Like, it's so like anybody can understand, even a 5-year-old. You're like, oh, all right. You got to be clear. You got to be simple. You got to just say it the way it is. Because it's hard. Otherwise, like it goes right over people's heads. And coming back to the meeting people where they're at, if you're not working to understand how they even think about things, you're not even going to know where to start with somebody. And it might, like you said before, and it probably will be something almost seemingly benign that could be holding the linchpin for all of their success. But perhaps they're worried about being judged for it being something so simple, or there's an infinite amount of reasons for what could be going on there.
So what if we change the language on it? What if instead of meeting someone where they're at, we change it to meeting someone where they need us to be? Because we don't actually know where people are at. And we don't know what's all behind the scenes and we don't know what's going on. So instead of meeting someone where they're at, it's like, no, I'm going to meet you where you need me to be or where you're comfortable having me. Because saying that we're going to meet someone where they're at means that we are now having to place a judgment, an idea, and a story on where we think that they are. So how can you actually meet someone where they're at? You can't, because we can't attach. We can't attach, we do, but we have to then attach a judgment. We have to attach all these things to it. We have to attach meaning to things that they haven't shared with us. Like, we have to attach all of this stuff to it to then be able to like hold space for them, meet them where they're at, all of these things. And it's like, but you don't know. Like, when's the last time we said, I am here. What do you need me to do? Do you need me to talk? Do you need me to shut up? Do you need me to crack jokes? Do you need me to blare loud music? Do you need me to bring you an ice cream cone? What do you need? Because I don't know where you're at. I will do what you need to feel safe right now, which would then also shift this idea that we have to reach out constantly to be met where we're at and everything's external, instead of being like, no, let me internalize that for a second and figure out, like, what do I need? What if I took my power back for a second? What do I need in this moment? We're so busy looking outside of us for these external factors, these external fixes, these, like, I need everybody else to make sure to make me feel like I'm okay, instead of being like, no, I'm actually really cool right now. Or, hey, I'm hurting right now, but like, everyone in my life always knows that I armadillo. And what I mean by that is, like, I have like this really, really soft center, and I know that, but I also got like a big hard shell because of what's gone on in my life. And so if I feel safe, then 100% have my belly, like, you're good to go. But the minute anything hard happens in my life, the minute any trauma happens, the minute anything big goes down, I armadillo hard. Like, hard. That doesn't mean that that's right or wrong, good or bad. That's just what I do. And I've lost friends over it because they're like, you don't bitch about stuff. And I'm like, no, I figure it out and then I'll discuss it. That's how I process, right? But that can make other people feel really uncomfortable. Often when someone's going through something really crazy, I'm like, I'll ask clients, I'll be like, what's the first thing you do? And if it's like, well, I phone this person, and then I phone this person, 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 and I'm like, and you're handing all your power out again. You're needing them to tell you if you're validated in your decisions. You're needing them to tell you if it's okay. You're needing them to do all of those things for you. Yeah, that's right. You should be mad at your husband. Yeah, that's right. You should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this, right? Like, and they're all giving their opinion based on what their perspective is, knowing the minute amount of details that they have on the situation, knowing one side of the story, and based on their filters of what they would do in that same situation if they were to put themselves in your shoe. We've lost our ability to feel strong in ourselves. We've lost our ability to have an opinion. We've lost our ability to be authentically us because we're so busy making sure that everybody else is part of every single conversation and decision. It goes back to that we all have the same haircut and we're wearing the same outfit again. Hashtag pumpkin spice latte, right? Like, we're so busy going back to that right now because we're watching everything around us on social media, and we're all of those things. You said you love how I'm so authentically me. I think one of the reasons why I'm so authentically me is that I don't bring 45 people into every single opinion that I have on my life. I don't need a ton of people to hold space for me. I need people in my world that when I go, oh, I was talking to a friend yesterday and he's like, man, we need a breakfast date again soon, because some of my favorite humans in my life are my guy friends. And I was like, April 10th. And he's like, why the 10th? I was like, it's my birthday and I want to enjoy my birthday. And he started laughing and he goes, are you seriously planning out your own entire day? And I was like, yeah, it's nobody else's job to celebrate my birthday, so I'm going to celebrate it.
Mhm.
And he's like, you might be the easiest friend I've ever had. I started laughing. He's like, I'll put it in my calendar. Right. Because I know that this year I want to feel a celebration on my birthday. So I will line up all the people that day to make it happen. And I will lay out my expectations of them in advance. And then I will ask their permission if they can meet them. We need to spend more time getting internal. We do. And in a way of like, no, who am I? Who am I if nobody else was around? Who am I if nobody else's opinion mattered right now? I don't need people to be safe in that way and hold space for me personally. Personally, I don't need that. I need people that have a strong enough opinion and a strong enough personality and a strong enough whatever that they'll challenge the hell out of me if I ask them to. That if I message someone and go, I need you to devil's advocate this, they'll be like, hell yeah, let's do this. Hey, this is my 3 fixes I have to this problem, and I need you to challenge me on them and really help me dig into this. And they have the capacity to do that. I don't need someone to just sit and listen to me bitch about my problems. And I think that's a piece that's missing right now. in our society.
Well, it's hard to put it back on somebody and say like, hey, you own this. But knowing how to say like, what you're really asking somebody to do is say, I'm going to hold up the mirror and just tell me what's real. And that's hard to do because most people don't want to. I think there's a lot of beauty in saying like, no, that's what I'm coming to this relationship for. I want
Right.
the people who are holding the mirror, not the people who are going to essentially, yes, like the classic yes man problem. I think there's the two sides of that. I see it all the time in the self-help space. Like, you mostly just go into somebody because they're saying what you want to hear. That's mostly what you're going. Okay, like you can do that. You're not going to go anywhere. Like you're going to feel good for a
My
few minutes.
my clients laugh all the time. They're like, you do know that if you were not the ass kicker hope giver, you'd have 10 times more clients. And I was like, but I'm never going to do a vision board with you. And I'm never going to sit and just listen to you complain and try to help you out with that. That's not why people come to me. People come to me because they're like, I don't know what's broken, but something's wrong and I need a fix. And I expect you to call me on it. Right? Like people come to me for a reason because that is my brand and that's who I am. And that's authentically who I am. And so I will tell clients like, oh no, you need a totally different kind of coach than I am. Because I will call you on it and I'm going to hold up the mirror and I'm going to do with so much freaking love. It'll shock you, but I'm still going to hold that up and I'm still going to call you on it. And if at some point in our coaching, you don't hate my guts or you're not mad at me, I have not done my job. Because comfort has gotten you where you are. And I will make you uncomfortable. Right. But my friends also know that. Like one of my friends phoned me on Friday and he was all grumpy about something. And I was like, you got 10 minutes rant. And he's like, I need 30. Can you give it? And I said, yeah, I will for you today. And he knows because we have been really good friends for a long time that means, yes, I will actually give you 30 minutes to rant right now without trying to fix anything for you. Because that is not what you're asking for. He ranted, he vented, he complained. I was like, oh, it's bad. It's so horrible. I gave him what he needed. Calls me back 10 minutes later. He's like, okay, now I need some hard truths. Tell me what your actual thoughts are on this. Because he knew he'd get them from me. And he's like, I don't like what you're telling me, but I know it's right. Right. I think that's where we can create a relationship with people to be like, no, right now, yeah, this is going to like, I will sit here and listen to you rant, but I'm not going to validate your rant. Right. Or I'm not going to just be like, or like, well, who do you need? Who do you need right now? Like I often ask my friends, like, do you need coached on or do you need friend on? Okay, you need friend on. Do you need like, I'm just going to shut up and listen to you? Or do you need the person who's like, and what are you going to do about it? Like, which one do you need? And they all laugh at me, but my inner circle all knows that they're like, I need you to just listen. I'm like, all right, go. Just go. I'm here. I'm going to listen and I'm going to love the hell out of you in it. Right. But at the same time, sometimes they're like, no, I need you to call me on it. And I'm like, all right. And I will. Right. Like, but they know that I love them and my intention behind it is so pure. But I've also had people go, I don't know if I could ever be friends with you. And I'm like, no, you couldn't, because you wouldn't be able to handle the fact that I'd be like, what are you going to do about it? And let's fix it. You're not a tree, move. like, and they don't want that, right? They don't want that. And they need people around them that are just going to make them feel comfortable in their misery. And I'm not that girl. Like, that is not who I am. And that's okay too.
I've enjoyed your reflections today. I was taking a look at the time and like, oh shit, a couple hours almost have gone by right now. It feels like five minutes have gone by. Time
We'll
flies
just
when you're
have to do
having
this
fun, right?
again. We'll just
I
have
mean,
to do
yeah.
this again.
Well, we were saying before, I got to come on your podcast too and hang out there as well.
Let's do
I
it.
just, I love just sitting and reflecting with this stuff because I mean, it's important. I think everything you're talking about here about different reflections on holding space. What does that mean? Meeting people where they need to be, holding up the mirror. What does it mean to be a friend? How do you be a good friend? Those are hard things that I don't I don't think enough people have questioned what they need for those things. So of course they're inevitably frustrated when they're not getting what they need out of relationships,
They're
or they don't
disappointed
know
all
which
the
relationship.
time.
Disappointed
All
all the
the
time.
time, but they have no idea why.
Yeah, yeah, and it takes some different opinions or different perspectives to open the door. And it is uncomfortable the first time you hear it because it's different. I haven't heard it before, but that's what will open the door to the reflection. If somebody's listening right now and they're like, yo, I dig this. I dig Dawn's vibe. And I want what how'd you say before? Kick ass kick, hope
The
give. Say
kicker,
it.
ass kicker, hope giver. It's literally my title on my business card.
Ass kicker, hope giver in their life. What's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Website is thetaylorway.ca. You can check me out there, The Taylor Way Now on Instagram, Done Taylor on Facebook, or The Taylor Way on Facebook. I'm all over the place. And I have a podcast, Taylor Way Talks. And it's literally, what do we wish people were talking about? Hard conversations. What do we wish people were talking about?
I love that. That will be in the show notes. So if anybody did not write that down or don't want to go back and rewind, go to the show notes and just click the link. So that will be right there for you. So it'll be very convenient. So you have to think less and just do more. That'll be okay.
Love it.
Dawn, what would be the final words of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Anything and everything that made you uncomfortable today, rumble in it and dig into it and figure out why. Because discomfort doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is discomfort is showing you when something rubs up against you a little bit. And it takes a mind to make wood smooth, right? It doesn't mean that that's easy, but sometimes you need something to just like rub off those harsh edges or those sharp edges. And so, yeah, if it makes you uncomfortable, that's where you need to dig.
Mic drop. There we go. Dawn, you're awesome. I can't wait to be a guest on your thing. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast today. I think this is a very important conversation that I'm excited to edit it again, listen to the stuff over my own version of going back and rewriting stories or re-listening stories. It's fun because when I go back, I'm usually going through something and then I hear the things like, oh yeah, that was what I needed to hear right now. Whether, it's been this very spiritual process for me. I'm just editing and producing a podcast, just listening to stuff. It's very interesting, but I'm excited to listen to this one. What do you say?
Honored to be here.
It's my honor to have you on. Everybody go check out the show notes. Get in touch with Dawn. She's awesome. Dawn, love you tons. So grateful you're in my life. This was fantastic. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation. So again, everybody go check out the show notes, go connect. And until next time.
I have to interrupt for a second. I was told you had 3 cool questions you asked at the end.
You're right. Let us do this 3 cool questions. That is my bad. I have dropped the ball.
Like, wait, I got told that there were 3 cool questions and I don't know what they are.
I completely dropped the ball of that. I got lost in the conversation. That is my own weakness right there. Thank you for holding up the mirror for me. Question number 1.
Yep.
What sports or creative activities did you do when you were younger, and how did you play them?
I played softball, but I got told that I threw like a boy. And so it was too aggressive. So they would try to put me in positions where I couldn't throw so hard because I'd hurt people. And no surprise, the defiance in me was like, yeah, okay, cool. And I may have purposely nailed the coach in his testes a few too many times. Before I wasn't allowed anymore. Everything I did until like a fuck off indifference level. So it's like if someone would be like, you can't do that, I'd be like, yeah, watch me. Yeah. That.
Love the response, and you will love why I asked that question. So I studied kinesiology in school, and my school was a lot of PE and fitnessy things, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the classes I took was about play, and I did not appreciate it at that time. But what I have learned is about the beauty of what play shows us. It shows us how we show up in general. So you pretty much just described a lot of just like everything in your story, gritty to the point, like
everything.
Let's go. I'm going to challenge, like that through line did not change through life. So
I'm thinking
your response was perfect.
I'm thinking like swimming lessons, but I was allergic to chlorine and they're like, you can't swim laps. And I was like, yeah, I can. Just put me on the edge and I'll puke into the drain. And my parents were always like, You can't, like, just get out of the damn pool. Like, you don't have to do the lessons. And I went all the way up to, like, I was like 2 levels from a lifeguard before I finally was like, I'm bored. So everything in my life was like that. Yeah.
Full throttle Dawn. Wow.
Full
That's
throttle, 100 miles a minute. You can't do moguls. You've never done a mogul. Hold my beer. See you at the bottom. Like, like that was like, people still tell stories about this to this day when I go back to my hometown. And one woman, she's like, I'll never forget sitting at the bottom of that double block diamond run and someone being like, girl's never done a mogul in her life. And she goes, I don't know what you like detached your hips and just went limp. And she's like, you aimed straight down that hill and ran that like you were a mogul professional. And you hit the bottom and zipped past us with a grin. And you were just like, mm-hmm. She's like, she's like, the sheer defiance in you was mind blowing to watch as a child. And I was like, yeah, that sums me up.
I'm so happy you got me to come back to these questions just for that one alone. That was already fantastic. Let's go to number two. Number two.
Yeah.
You're stranded on a desert island. What movie and TV show are you bringing? And that's all you get to watch for the rest of your life. Movie and TV show.
Gilmore Girls, because
Gilmore.
it matches the pace of my brain with like that super high vibrational frequency. Like, it matches the pace with all the words, but you can watch it 100 times and pick up different things every single time. So it would feel like a new show every time if you even just focused on like, just pay attention to this character or just pay attention to that one. And it's humor and drama and all the things. Movie. John Wick.
It would be.
John Wick, because it's like a healthy psychological release of anger. And if you're stranded on a desert island, you'd have moments where you were like really, really pissed off and you wouldn't know how to release it. And so watching that, you could be like, there's my emotional release of rage and anger. Because he's really mad. Like, somebody hurt his puppy. Like, he's very vengeful.
Legit, and rightfully so. You don't fuck with a guy's dog. That, like,
Nope.
everybody's on board. Dog,
The
let's
minute
go.
the minute the dog happens, you're like, oh, here he goes. And it's like, no. And I think also it would teach you some really cool skills if you like slow motioned it. So if pirates ever came, you could like take care of yourself with like a pen or a stick or like anything.
How you answer that question, because when I think about entertainment, how you choose to entertain yourself, you're looking for the lessons, like you're looking for intensity, you're looking for all these different. I think there's something about that. It shows how do you engage with like your own experiences. I love that response. I did not anticipate John Wick. That was awesome. You're the second person who's gone with Gilmore Girls, so that's interesting. Third and final question.
Yeah.
What is your deathbed meal and who are you sharing it with? And then, of course, why?
Ooh. Blueberries. I would eat blueberries. Like as many blueberries as I could possibly have. It is my all-time favorite food in this entire world. And I don't know why, but I'm like addicted to blueberries. So like really good ones, like big, thick, plump from Peru when they're super sweet, but they're big and crunchy. Probably not what you've ever heard, but that would be my
No, would
deathbed
not.
meal.
Not in a million years would I have guessed that.
And my husband, but not because it's like, oh, that's so sweet and that's so funny. My husband, because he has the funniest, most inappropriate sense of humor ever. And he would have me laughing and cracking a joke, and he would just make it so entertaining at the end.
Mm.
Like, that's just who he is. Like, he's got the funniest, driest sense of humor. But he'd also say things like, so like laying in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm kind of guy, like the suicide attempt we were dating at the time, he showed up with a cactus and stabbed me with it. And then he brought a balloon and he smacked me in the head with it. And I'm literally like laying there, like talking about putting me in the psych ward. And that's literally what he did. And he's like, I'm really mad at you. And I couldn't punch you and I couldn't stab you. So I did this way instead. We were like 16. And like that sums up who he is. And like he has not changed since. So he is the guy that would crack an inappropriate joke. And he'd be like, are you gonna be done soon? Because like I have dinner plans. Like he's he's that guy.
You've got blueberries, he's got dinner plates.
You would love him. Like we were talking one day when we were like redoing our will, and he's like, how long does it take to get the life insurance? And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, so like if you die on a Monday, the funeral's what, Friday, because it's 5 days. He's like, could I get the life insurance by then? Because then I could like buy a motorbike Saturday and like peace out. Like would that, does that timeline work for you? Like he's that guy. Like he just he is so freaking hilarious. And so yeah, I would go out laughing at something inappropriate that he said.
So I'll share why I asked that question as well. And I'll give you the overarching theme to all three of them. I believe world peace is going to be solved one family dinner at a time. It's my favorite thing to do is to share a meal with people.
Yeah.
I also believe we are all each other's mirrors. And on our deathbed, the person we're sharing that with, I believe, is the person showing you the highest version of your growth in your life. But to hear about it, like in your life, like at the end, laughing, like rejoicing, making light of the situation. It sounds very much like how you've lived, finding a way to have humor, to have growth, to be challenged,
Sure.
to challenge yourself. Like that sounds, I mean, all of the answers were consistent. So I love that question in general. And on another note, my father and I, when I was growing up, we would always have a boys' night once every X amount of weeks, whatever, 4 to 6 weeks. Travel a lot, he worked a lot, whatever. But this is how we connected. We would go to Sports Authority. Maybe he'd buy me some sports thing. We'd go see a movie and we have a bite to eat together. So this is my small way of taking a little journey, getting closer together, my own version of that. So I get to share a little bit of my own history with that. But shit, I am real glad that you stopped me and we asked those questions because holy shit, from John Wick to blueberries. I mean,
I've always joked that I'm going to leave this world like I came into it, unwanted and wrecking somebody's day. Which is, I know, totally inappropriate, but I've always laughed at it, which also then ties into like my husband cracking inappropriate jokes. Because I'd be like, sorry, am I wrecking your dinner plans? Because I'm going to stay alive now until at least 7. So you miss your reservation. Like, like that's no, I've always joked about that. Like, it's going to be like some crazy thing, like guns blazing, cops chasing me. I'm going to be laughing. Yeah.
Somebody with a softball in their testicles, like, you know, the whole bit. Apparently.
Something. Like, one of my nephews said to me a while ago, he's like, Auntie Dawn, I want to live so long. He's like, because I don't think you'll ever die. And he's like, I just want to be like, I just want to watch your life.
Incredible.
And I was like, deal, let's do this.
Deal. We locked it up.
Right?
Dawn, you're awesome. You ended this episode fantastically. Like, that was awesome. You're just like, wait. I thought there were some questions. There's some fun, like trivia-ish type of questions. So I was like, shit.
Yeah, I didn't know what they were.
Thank God.
That is super fun.
That was, oh my God. I'm so glad we went back and did that. Well, there you go. Everybody who kept going through that like awkward transition, you got the extra fun bonus stuff. That's like today's bonus material. The outtakes, but not really the outtakes. Still part of the thing,
right?
If that didn't convince everybody who's listening right now to go check out your stuff, I don't know what does. Like, you're a crazy person at this point. But Don, wow, I was already at 11, and now we took it to a 12. You're awesome. So everybody go check out Dawn. Thank you for being on the podcast today, my dear. And everybody, until next time, love everybody.